When I was a kid, Assassin's Creed was one of those franchises I could never really get into. The idea of a stealth game exploring history through virtual reality was cool, but the 2012 Apocalypse Ancient Civilization stuff just never was my thing. All that with the decreasing quality of each game after Black Flag just really turned me off from getting into the series. But after Assassin's Creed Unity, Ubisoft felt they needed to make some changes. They set aside some extra time to make a new game engine, which switched up gameplay and increased overall quality. Now, I still didn't care about the new game, Origins, but that Christmas I asked for an Xbox One, and my mom thought it'd be a good game to go alongside it. See, when I was younger, I was super into ancient Egypt, one of the things that led me to become an archaeologist. And while I'd grown out of that interest for the most part, there was still some lingering appreciation for all that stuff. When I found out it was set in Caesar's time in Egypt, I was even more into the whole idea. That Christmas Eve, as I waited for the game to install, was my first real step into the franchise. And now I've played every single game since the refresh. Origins is a very solid game in my mind. It's not without its faults, the combat isn't that special, the story wasn't all that interesting, and even though the open world is impressively large with a lot of great locations, there are huge portions of it that are just, well, desert, varied types of desert, quite pretty desert, but just fucking desert. Despite all that, I really enjoyed my time playing it. The stealth mechanics were similar to the other games, but Sinu, the eagle that can mark enemies, gave infiltrating a fortress a good balance between strategic and casual methods of approach. I for one loved spending a long time just taking out enemies one by one while listening to a podcast. The game was also designed in a way that made direct combat pretty uncommon, which is exactly what I want out of a stealth game. It is beautiful even now, despite me not being in love with the stylization. Plus, upgrading all your gear was very attainable. I thought the temple exploration was really neat too. I don't think you could do a game set in Egypt without it, and it plays well with the Isu in the franchise. The biggest drawbacks were the lackluster skill tree and predictable story. The only part that I hated were the god boss battles, but from what I remember, those were all more or less optional. Considering how much I like this game, it's no surprise I would want the next one. But I was concerned when they announced it would be coming out only a year later. I thought yearly releases were a problem. Was Odyssey going to be riddled with bugs? Could it properly build on Origins? Could Ubisoft make a good Assassin's Creed game set even further back in time? Well, it turns out they could. I would say Odyssey, even though the story and especially the post-main game story was a lot more annoying than Origins, is an overall better game. It still looks great. In fact, the environments are quite diverse, which makes them very pretty. The map was also better filled out. Sure, a lot of it is ocean, but it makes sense for the setting and gave more use to the ship mechanics that were barely present in Origins. After Black Flag, it's no surprise they'd want to try and capture that same feeling, even if they didn't quite get there. Now, while I said I wasn't a big fan of the story, I did like a lot of the smaller quests found throughout the game. A good mix of myths and real historical events and characters to play around with. In terms of gameplay, the combat was similar, but more enjoyable with the attack skills. The abilities you could use added a bit of flair. Also, there were way more varieties of weapons and armor, with more customization at your disposal. You could even decide which piece looked like what, which was a huge upgrade from Origins. The skill tree was also a lot more interesting, with way better skills to unlock. I do think though that some were a bit too easy to get, like you could take no fall damage by level 20 or something, which drastically changed how I played the game. Overall, I really liked Odyssey. All my least favorite parts, like the god boss battles and dumb post-game shit, were either quick to get through or entirely optional. While the story wasn't great, in fact, I don't really remember anything from it, it was fine, I guess. I still think I had better memories with Origins, but Odyssey would probably be more enjoyable for most people. Now, while I liked both these games, it would be many years till I gave the next entry into the franchise, Valhalla, any attention. At the time, the setting just wasn't my thing. Plus, it came out 2 years after the last game, which while I assume the quality would have been pretty good with that development time, I had a lot of time to focus on other games, especially with COVID and all. So I just assumed I'd never play it. And since no new game came out after Valhalla for such a long time, I just assumed it was a complete failure. However, a couple of summers ago, I saw it on sale. I wanted a new game to play after work, and had just gone to England the winter before, so I thought I'd give it a try. I wasn't sure I would like it, but god damn it, I fucking hated it. Until I had played Mirage, Valhalla was probably the biggest waste of money I had ever made. Before I get into all of my gripes with the game, I feel like I should give credit where credit's due. For one, the game is beyond gorgeous. Even on my Xbox One, the lighting, the snow, the textures, they were all beautiful. The music was also decent. I don't remember any tracks off the top of my head, but listening back to it, I think the music did a lot of heavy lifting for the tone of the game's story. It also goes well with the visuals, but since the writing's not all that good, I'm glad the music can help make any scene at least feel somewhat interesting. I also liked the ability to put up and down the hood. It felt very stealthy, despite most of the game not really having that vibe. The only other positive thing I can say about this game would probably be that it was neat going to all the places in the game I had gone to in real life. Yeah, that's about it. So now time to trash on it, I guess. Now, I can't say for when the game first launched, but when I played it, I experienced very few bugs. However, it may as well have been riddled with them considering how poorly designed this game is, especially for the Xbox One. The UI, for instance, really pissed me off. The menus were more or less the same as the previous two games, but for some reason they decided to add pointless steps to the shopping interface. When you click the button to interact with the shop, it puts you into a dialogue menu, and then from there, you have to select if you want to use their shop. This is something in so many games, and I don't know why. But it's especially bad in this one, since the load times, at least on my Xbox One, were horrible for this system. It was infuriating trying to upgrade my weapons, and I often wanted to change how my armor looked, which required going into a shop, opposed to simply doing it in the inventory for free like in Odyssey. I assume the shop system was set up how it was to imply that the people entering your settlement are interesting, inviting you to talk with them. The only issue is they're all boring, and once you do talk to them, there's no reason to want to do it again. So basically, I wasted a ton of time waiting for the damn dialogue menu to load, and then to wait for the shop one to load. And if I accidentally selected the wrong submenu, I got to go through that again. It would have been very simple for them to just add 2 options for interacting with the shop, like press A to talk or X to shop. This may seem minor, but I was really pissed off at this. I actually almost stopped playing the game for a while. I'm not even kidding. And just to push it even more, oh, gee, but don't play it on the Xbox One. It was made for that fucking system. Are you insane? What do you mean? This is very reasonable criticism. Shut the fuck up. I don't know. Did other people have this issue? I hope they did. I hope it's not just me, because then I will seem crazy. But I swear to God, this was such a bad issue. All right, fuck it. I'm gonna move on now. I'm getting really annoyed. Speaking of the settlements, for the most part, I didn't really have an issue with it. It makes sense for the setting, and it was pretty satisfying to grow the town. However, with all the DLC that has come out, it was really annoying having all these random people show up for quests I didn't care about. It was especially dumb for the really mythologically heavy ones, which just took me out of the whole thing. I've never really liked how it's been employed in the main game story for any of the refresh games, except for the Vision and Origins, I guess. One of the quests like this, which I think is a part of the main game, was a neat idea, but a huge waste of time. See, at one point in the game, you'll find yourself in Asgard playing as Odin. It's like a vision that's supposed to mirror parts of the main quest, I guess, but I guess I wasn't really paying attention. I assumed I had to complete the whole quest line there and spent a couple hours doing random bullshit that was completely disconnected from the main story and from the character I had been building up to that point, only to find out that it was more or less all optional. The idea is fine, going through several Norse myths, but the way it was paced and how they implemented it into the game was really annoying. I think it's also supposed to be some vision of the Isu before the great catastrophe that killed most of them, but I was really bored, so I can't really remember most of it. I hate all the god stuff they put in these games. It's just not my thing. I wouldn't have an issue with it if they didn't trick me into playing it. Another really dumb thing was the skill tree. In Origins, the skill tree was very simple and honestly could have just done without it. Just make the skills unlockable through quests or through the main story, especially when the abilities aren't that useful. But in Odyssey, they really improved it with skills I actually used and was excited for. So I expected Valhalla to expand on Odyssey's system, especially since the combat mechanics are overall pretty similar. And well, it is similar, but way more convoluted and stupidly designed. Now, I'm only making this comparison due to the similar visual design philosophy, but just take a look at Skyrim's skill tree. It's constellations, a neat idea and fits in with the Norse inspiration. It also lines up with the menu design, being the sky after you move up in the menu. Each part is separated into relatively distinct categories, and one point can be used to unlock different skills depending on the individual skills level. It's clear, and well, it just works. But now take a look at Valhalla's. It's a fucking mess. What am I even looking at? This thing is impossible to navigate without studying it. I didn't even know what half the main skills were until I randomly stumbled upon them. I didn't really have any goals in mind. Now your main question may be, what were all those dots? Well, that's the tree. It spreads in every direction and is nonsensically set up. Why do I need to unlock a spear skill to get a dagger skill? I don't even use spears. You know how in most games when you level up, you get a base increase into your damage and defense and maybe your health? Well, in this game, you select which one you get. I wouldn't really have an issue with this if it didn't feel so pointless and unsatisfying. The increase is so mild and it's so many numbers and percentages. Why not just say increased weapon damage? Plus, it's kind of like in the older Fallout games where you would put numbers into stats. Sure, it eventually makes a difference, but you can't really feel it in the moment. Honestly, every time I leveled up, I was annoyed that I had to pick these things. I would throw points into random stats I didn't care about just to get to one where I can increase my dagger damage. Who would think that's a good way to design a game? Speaking of my weapon choice, they mix a few weapons together in the skill tree. For instance, daggers are combined with sickles. Now, I don't know about you, but I play a game with assassin in the title to be an assassin. So when I saw daggers and sickles, I knew that would be my focus. I was especially excited over sickles. It's just not a weapon you see in a lot of games. So throughout the game, I focused on those weapons, but I never seemed to find any sickles. Turns out they're only added in DLC. In an update, they made the skill tree show the new exclusive weapon types even if you didn't download the DLC. It's just a sleazy way of pushing the player to buy DLC. Or just lazy. And considering it's Ubisoft we're talking about, I wouldn't be surprised if it was both. The other issue with the weapons is a bit more baffling. See, in Valhalla, there were actually a limited number of weapons and armor. Each piece is located in a different spot or throughout shops that are predetermined. Now, I don't have an issue with this concept, but for my case, it made a negative impact on my gameplay experience. Now, through the whole base game, there are 6 daggers, which is pretty similar for the other types of weapons. However, the best dagger of the game is located in the first section of the game. By the mid-game, I got the second best base game dagger. Basically, I was using the same fucking dagger the whole game with only a mild addition partway through. Now, maybe the developers didn't know it would be the best one, or they didn't think anyone would care about daggers, but it's still a bit confusing that they wouldn't make sure to put better items for all classes later on into the game. I like knowing I'm getting a better dagger as I play, or at least changing up which one I'm using as I go, especially since I can't use the fucking sickles without buying the goddamn deal. When it comes to the story, Valhalla is, well, it's pretty basic and predictable. I wasn't paying that much attention, to be honest, and it's been a while, so I'm not going to go into much detail. For the most part, I didn't have an issue with the first act. It worked well as an introduction to a couple of the characters and a nice way to lean into the setting of Vikings colonizing England. But there was one part that confused the hell out of me. So basically, right at the start, the best friend of the player returns home from a voyage with some treasure, as well as a guy called Basim. Basim is a hidden one, and he plays the role of the cool assassin type, or at least that's what I think they were going for, but he gets really dumb by the end of the game. He gives you a hidden blade. Yeah, right from the start of the game. You don't have to join the hidden ones or anything. You just get the blade and a tutorial. The developers really couldn't wait to integrate it into the story later on. It was really lazily integrated and made it clear Ubisoft didn't care to make this an Assassin's Creed game. The story goes along more or less like this. Your family dies when you're a kid, so you get taken to the care of some chief. Your best friend, Sigurd, who you view as a brother, returns home from a voyage with some assassins to kill a rival chief who is a member of the pre-Templar Templars. After this, you, Sigurd, the assassins, and some other people leave Norway after a disagreement Sigurd had with his dad. A running plot point in the game is that you have visions of killing Sigurd, as well as visions of Odin, which I've already discussed a bit. Once you're in England, you basically go around in different places trying to get alliances with the other kingdoms and Viking clans, while being IV-dripped some more visions and interpersonal relationships. Sigurd goes a bit insane and hashtag deep, moody, and arrogant. And the main character is supposed to care about all this, I guess. Basim pushes him to believe he's a god, and I don't hate the concept, but it felt like it happened a bit too quickly. I honestly can't remember much of the middle of the game, but I will say a couple of things. There were a few cool mini-stories. I particularly enjoyed the one where you were trick-or-treating. It was cute. I also enjoyed riding around England. The game engine really is beautiful. Also, the modern time was barely in the game, and I didn't really know what was going on. Basically, there's some wonky stuff going on with Earth's magnetic field, so they're trying to do a similar end-of-the-world thing from the earlier games, but I didn't really care about it. I never found Layla to be an interesting character, and it's not like she was all that prevalent in Odyssey anyway. But here it felt like they only put her in because she was in the other games, but thankfully we don't have to deal with that anymore. So at the climax of the game, you go back to Norway and do this Isu artifact thing that looks like Yggdrasil. That's basically the Animus from the Assassin's Creed movie. Holy shit, I can't believe I remembered anything from that film. I watched it on a plane like 6 years ago. Anyway. Now, I think this was a good idea in terms of design. Like, it could very well be what the Templars based the Animus on. The machine puts people, well, I guess it was designed for the Isu, but it can put people into a sort of virtual reality. In this case, it's Valhalla. Out of all the things in the story, I like the concept behind this the most, but the section itself is just really boring and dumb things in the plot make me annoyed. It was in this last section that I was only playing to finish the game. So you and Sigurd connect yourselves into the machine to go to Valhalla, where you pretty much go through this really boring section of fighting people without any consequences. I get it in terms of the mythology and all, but it was really boring. After a bit, you realize it's a simulation and push Sigurd back into reality. Oop, there goes gravity, and he just forgets how much of an arrogant asshole he's been. At this point, you do another boring boss fight with Odin in a black void. After this, you find Basim, who claims that the three of you are reincarnations of Norse gods. Basim is apparently Loki, and you have to do another really boring and annoying boss fight. He just magically jumps and teleports around, and you hit him a bit until you win. Basim gets trapped in an Isu artifact. You become the leader of the clan, which you basically had been for the entire game anyway, and that's when the post-game starts. But I just wanted to be done with this piece of crap, so I never played it. Back in the present day, Layla goes to stabilize the magnetic field of the Earth by going into the same Isu artifact. In the machine, she meets Basim, who tells her how to fix everything, but then tricks her into staying in the machine. Basim then comes out, having not aged a day because Isu magic or something. Layla then becomes some sort of seer, killing her body for some reason to try and stop future catastrophes, and her attitude was very arrogant and funny. Then you go on to play as Basim using the Animus. I was surprised by Basim's role in this game. He was quite minimal until the very end, which isn't a compliment. You learn maybe one thing about his past, that his family died, but you never really learn why he would do all this and why a guy from Persia would think he's Loki. Luckily, there's a whole nother game to expand on this character, right? Right? Overall, Valhalla was boring. I never wish to play it again, and I swore I would never buy another Assassin's Creed game. So anyway, several months ago I decided to buy Mirage. The marketing behind this game pushed it as a return to form. Set in the Middle East, similar animations, assassin order stuff that had been more or less ignored for the past several games, so you can finally learn more about this character and why a Persian man would believe he's a Norse god. The game was announced pretty close to when I finished Valhalla, so it goes without saying that I had zero interest in picking it up. But there were 3 whole years between Valhalla's release and Mirage, so I thought there might be an increase in quality, though a good chunk of that was taken up with COVID. So what led me to eventually picking it up? Boredom. It was on sale and I wanted a game to play for my last semester in college, so what did I think of it? It was probably the biggest waste of money I had ever made. This game is an overpriced DLC for Valhalla, and it makes absolutely no sense that this would be a standalone game. I have mixed feelings about this actually being DLC. On the one hand, it stars a character that you play as in Valhalla, and it's pretty damn short. On the other hand, they did mix things up, and there's quite a lot going on here in terms of map and gameplay changes. My guess is that this was entirely planned as a standalone game, but they gave themselves too short of a schedule and ended up making a pretty decently sized, just okay to bad DLC. I guess I'll start with what I liked. The setting, Persia, was neat and fairly well done. I'll talk about my issues with it later, but overall the city was fun to run around. It did feel very Assassin's Creed-y. They finally fixed the skill tree, simplifying the hell out of it. Now again, I'll discuss my issues with it later, but overall it's leaps and bounds better than Valhalla's. Similarly, they fixed a lot of the minor issues I had with the shops, though load times on my Xbox One weren't great for both fast travel and simple talk menus. I also found the music to be quite good, very fitting. The stealth in this game was a lot better than Valhalla, and I really enjoyed throwing knives as opposed to bows. It helps the game stand out compared to the previous ones. I also like the simplified weapons. I know I complained about it in Valhalla, but I think since the game was more conducive to stealth, I didn't mind using the same sword for most of the game. Also, the large fortresses were really fun to invade, even though some of them were so large that enemies would respawn as you went along. Alright, that's what I liked, now onto the bad stuff. Firstly, the map. Like Origins, a lot of this map is desert. About 90% of the story takes place in one city. I would have much preferred if the map focused more there instead of having a huge chunk of nothing. I wouldn't have felt a need to run around the desert to get synchronization points that were almost never useful. But even then, the city itself was very, well, it felt copied and pasted. The difference between the inner and outer city was minor at best. The whole game could have taken on one city street and it would have looked more or less the same. I also really wasn't a fan of the outfits. Sure, you could dye it a slightly different color, but I don't know why you would. I mean, it's nice to have the option, I just didn't really care about it. I also felt like the bird played a very minor role in this game. Honestly, I could say the same for Valhalla. I can't even remember either of the birds' names from those games. Seems like they only exist because they were in the other two games. In terms of the skill tree, while it was better than Valhalla, it was a little too simple. None of the skills were all that interesting, and requiring more points to unlock each skill as you go just makes me less excited to level up. Combat was pretty much the same as the other games, so I don't really have any complaints. My main issue is the gimmick ability. You can use some adrenaline to make a series of assassinations that involve teleporting around where you won't get spotted. It's actually a neat idea, but that's all you can do. You can increase how much adrenaline you can store up, but you can't use it for more interesting abilities or assassinations. A few hours in and I got pretty bored of this. Felt like a lost opportunity. In terms of the story, it was also just okay. Most of it was very predictable until about halfway through when I just stopped paying any real attention. I probably remember less of this game's story than Valhalla's, despite having played it only a few months ago. Basically, Basim is Aladdin, but he watches some orphans or something, and they all die after you steal an Isu artifact. After this, Basim gets all sad and finds his way to the Hidden Ones. There was this whole montage of Basim training there, but none of it really worked. Like, you spend maybe 15 minutes there, including the test, aka tutorial. You have basically no reason to care about how Basim went from moody to happy and fulfilled through the Hidden Ones. He just changes over a 3-minute cutscene. It's really poorly executed. I get you want to get into the action, which I appreciate, but don't attempt a meaningful character arc if it starts and ends in a montage. After this, you go back to Persia and do some missions that I barely remember. You kill some guys. That's pretty much it. There's also this B-plot that I never finished that involves working with Basim's friend to figure out these weird nightmares he has. He sees this weird monster that probably represents something, but I never cared to learn. At the end of the game, the pre-Templar Templars invade the Hidden One's base, and you're supposed to care about that, I guess. Again, you're here for like 15 minutes previously. Why would I give a shit? 20 fucking hours I had in that game. It was so unsatisfying. At no point do you even go to the present day. And it's not just some flashback, it's all animacy. So it's VR, but you don't even know if Basim is the one doing it. Maybe it answers it in the post game, but I had no interest in doing that, so sorry if my complaint is unwarranted. As far as I'm concerned, if your game isn't interesting enough to keep me playing, you may as well not have included it. It's not a big deal, it's just weird. I left the game with more questions about Basim than I got answers. Sure, I know how his family died, but why the fuck does he think he's Loki? So Mirage was a waste of time. I'm not sure if it's worse than Valhalla, but it's definitely a bigger waste of money. I have no interest in picking up the next game. Sure, it's a setting I've wanted forever, but it's clear that they have no care to make a decent game anymore. I'm never playing an Assassin's Creed game again, god damn it. Yeah, I bought it. Look, I wasn't going to, but I feel committed to playing all these games now. Originally, this video was going to go up the day it was released, but I was lazy. I've barely played it, but what do I think so far? It's just okay. The game looks good, the camera is a little too close, the menu is a little odd, the skill tree looks a little weird, the voice acting is just okay, the pacing so far is horrendous, and I'm flabbergasted that they did the character arc and a montage thing again. If you care to hear the rest of my thoughts on the game, you can check out my gaming channel. I'll link it in the description, but here's a taste of last week's stream. Why'd this game have to get political? Clipping. They could have chosen for it to not look like that, but they did anyway. Honestly, this gets like a 3 out of 10 because the game had to get political. Honestly, I'm just impressed that an Assassin's Creed game is starting without someone either dying or having a family member die.
A few moments later.
God, this is like the same stupid montage that was in Mirage too. It's just like a bunch of stuff that like I can't care about because I'm not doing it and I barely know this character. And I barely care about this character. You know, this game wasn't made by a Japanese developer because A, you can play as a black character, and B, the female character does not have massive tits. I'll be streaming every Saturday around 7 PM EST, and maybe Sundays and Fridays. So I loved Origins, enjoyed Odyssey, hated Valhalla, and was ripped off by Mirage. Time to see where Shadows will fare. Thank you for watching. I'm planning on releasing a video once a week, but we'll see if I'll stick to that. It'll probably vary on topic and style till I find something that works, but expect quick reviews of shows, games, and movies. Anyway, bye.